Sitting alone in a cafe after being fired. Lorraine had reached her breaking point. She had tried everything to endure her job but had finally mustered the courage to stand up to her arrogant boss. The result? She was promptly fired. And now she found herself anxiously contemplating how to manage her bills. Living paycheck to paycheck had left her in a precarious situation. I know it's tough. But I had no choice. She reminded herself as she sat in a New York cafe, regretting her situation. Lorraine's workplace was just a few buildings away. And she often frequented it after work. Outside, there were straw chairs and round glass tables, each meticulously adorned with vibrant flowers and magazines. But on that day, Lorraine was too distracted to appreciate the cafe's elegance, or to enjoy her once hot espresso that had long gone cold. Her mind was consumed by worries about what she would do next and the nerve-wracking job search process. Suddenly, a weak voice interrupted her thoughts. "Please excuse me, miss. Do you mind if I have the rest of your coffee? I'm feeling a little under the cold weather," the voice said. Lorraine looked up and noticed a disheveled man in front of her. It didn't take her long to realize he was homeless. Flustered, she hesitated. But the man repeated himself. "Yes. The coffee. Can I have it?" he asked, pointing at her cup. "Yeah, sure that I mean. I wasn't going to have it anyway," she replied, offering it to him. "Please. Join me." The man nodded gently as he took a seat. "It's excellent. But it would have been even better if it had been hot," he said, taking a sip. "Thank you for letting me have it. My name is Jeffrey. Lorraine Simpson," she replied. "No worries. Jeffrey." He settled down with the cup and said, "If you don't mind. Lorraine. I can see something's bothering you. Not that I have the right to meddle in your affairs. But if sharing it with me makes you feel better, I'm all ears. Just saying." Lorraine smiled a little. "That's actually really generous of you, Jeffrey. Thank you for asking. Honestly, I feel horrible because I lost my job. I'm a nurse. And my boss was causing trouble at work. So I lost my temper. Yelled at him in retaliation. And he fired me. Now, I'm at a loss for what to do. I've been having financial problems. And lately, that's all there is to it. Getting fired feels horrible. And a life with no money is even worse." She sighed and shook her head, immediately regretting it as she glanced at Jeffrey, who had it even worse. "Sorry. I think I overshared. I'm sorry if I offended you." No. You didn't," Jeffrey replied, waving his hands. "It's all right. I hope you feel better now that you've gotten it out of your system." "Very much. Thank you," Lorraine said, feeling a sense of relief. "Let me get you something to eat." She suddenly felt grateful to Jeffrey for his thoughtfulness. She ordered a tuna sandwich and a fresh batch of 2 cups of coffee, even though she knew it would shrink her pocket even more. As the two talked over coffee, Lorraine felt her heart lighten, temporarily freed from the weight of her worries. During their conversation, Jeffrey laughed and said, "If I were your boss, I'd come to you in a limo and hire you for my medical center or whatever they call it. I'd be delighted to have you on my team. How could someone fire you?" Lorraine blushed and said, "That was all I needed to hear today. Thank you, Jeffrey. I feel really good after speaking with you." After finishing their coffee, Jeffrey offered to walk Lorraine home. And she gladly accepted. As they headed towards her house, Lorraine couldn't help but think. Such a kind soul. Jeffrey is. I should have asked him about his worries too. How could I be so self-centered? I hope we meet again. Jeffrey. I really do. That night, her fears gripped her once more as she sat alone at home. She couldn't shake the fact that she was jobless. And she cried herself to sleep due to all the anxiety and worry. The next morning, Lorraine was awakened by the doorbell. She hurriedly threw on a sweater and rushed to answer the door. To her surprise, she found a man in a suit standing at her doorstep. And a limo parked outside her house. The man introduced himself as Stuart and said, "My boss is looking forward to seeing you." Lorraine. Lorraine was baffled and replied, "I think you have the wrong address. Mr. Stuart. I'm not expecting anyone." Stuart persisted. "Aren't you Lorraine Simpson?" At this point, Lorraine was utterly confused. But she decided to go with the man to get to the bottom of the situation. Fearing the worst, she had 911 typed on her phone, ready to call if needed. The limo pulled up at one of the town's most prestigious medical clinics. As she met the owner, she realized it was none other than Jeffrey. He looked entirely different and elegant in his suit. Jeffrey explained that he was a psychologist who had disguised himself as a homeless man as part of a sociological experiment for his research. When he met Lorraine, he saw her determination and decided to hire her. "People know who I am," he explained. "Fame has its drawbacks. If I approached them as a doctor, they wouldn't be honest with me. And my experiment would fail. So this was the only option." He offered Lorraine a job and hired her on the spot. Lorraine was beyond grateful and couldn't believe how things had unfolded for her. It seemed that the world was rewarding the kindness she had shown to a homeless man. If you enjoyed the story, please consider giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with someone who might find it interesting. As they walked together, Lorraine noticed that Jeffrey always kept a considerable distance behind her. She pointed it out. And he blushed, explaining, "I'm a homeless man. If people see us walking together, they might not see it in the right light. I look scruffy and filthy." Lorraine smiled, shook her head, and reached for his hand. "I don't care what others think," she said. "To me, you're a kind-hearted man who made me feel better by listening to my worries. Your appearance and status are the least of what matters. Jeffrey, you shouldn't let people judge you like that. You deserve to be respected." Jeffrey nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. When they reached her home, Lorraine offered Jeffrey a place to spend the night in her guest room. But he politely declined, not wanting to trouble her unnecessarily. He thanked her and walked away. Lorraine thought to herself, "Such a kind soul. I should have asked him about his worries too. How could I be so self-centered? I hope we meet again. Jeffrey. I really do." That night, Lorraine's fears consumed her as she sat alone at home. The fact that she was jobless weighed heavily on her. And she cried herself to sleep due to the anxiety and worry. The next morning, Lorraine was awakened by the doorbell. She hurriedly threw on a sweater and rushed to answer it. To her surprise, she found a man in a suit standing at her doorstep. And a limo parked outside her house. The man introduced himself as Stuart and said, "My boss is looking forward to seeing you." Lorraine. Lorraine was baffled. She replied, "I think you have the wrong address. Mr. Stuart. I'm not expecting anyone." Stuart persisted. "Aren't you Lorraine Simpson?" At this point, Lorraine was utterly confused. But she decided to go with the man to get to the bottom of the situation. Fearing the worst, she had 911 typed on her phone, ready to call if needed. The limo pulled up at one of the town's most prestigious medical clinics. As she met the owner, she realized it was none other than Jeffrey. He looked entirely different and elegant in his suit. Jeffrey explained that he was a psychologist who had disguised himself as a homeless man as part of a sociological experiment for his research. When he met Lorraine, he saw her determination and decided to hire her. "People know who I am," he explained. "Fame has its drawbacks. If I approached them as a doctor, they wouldn't be honest with me. And my experiment would fail. So this was the only option." He offered Lorraine a job and hired her on the spot. Lorraine was beyond grateful and couldn't believe how things had unfolded for her. It seemed that the world was rewarding the kindness she had shown to a homeless man. If you enjoyed the story, please consider giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with someone who might find it interesting. Sierra Forney is a happily married middle-class American mother with 2 children, Anthony, 13, and Margot, 8. She lives a seemingly ideal life with no financial complications, a nice house, and a husband, John Stanford Queen, who loves and respects her. However, Sierra knows that appearances can be deceiving. And in every family, there are underlying issues. Sierra's husband, John, is a respected Marine sergeant who spends a significant amount of time aboard a ship on the high seas. While he loves his job, this prevents him from being home with his family more often. As a result, Sierra takes on the role of a full-time mother and is responsible for her children's education. She adores being a mother but sometimes wishes for her husband's presence to help her navigate the challenges, especially when dealing with their 13-year-old son, Anthony. Anthony, even at a young age, had a tendency to be arrogant. From the age of 5 or 6, he enjoyed flaunting the possessions his parents provided. Whether it was at school, baseball practice, or social gatherings, he always found a way to let everyone know how fortunate he was. Initially, Sierra didn't think much of it. And her husband, John, believed it was a natural phase for a boy his age. John was proud of what they were providing for their children. Sierra, on the other hand, had reservations. She wanted to correct Anthony's attitude but often avoided arguments with her husband. She understood that her husband's absence due to his military service made him appreciate their son's accomplishments. But she felt it was essential to teach Anthony humility. John reassured her, saying, "When I was his age, we barely had enough money to buy clothes for ourselves. I think if I'd been as lucky as he's been, I'd want to show the world too. But don't worry, honey. He's just a kid. Kids this age don't know what it means to be humble. Give him time, and he'll figure it out for himself." Sierra responded, "I understand, John. I didn't live surrounded by luxuries when I was little either. But I never liked to brag." She appreciated her husband's perspective but remained concerned about their son's behavior in front of others, much less in front of less fortunate children. "I'm afraid our son thinks he's superior to others and has the right to humiliate them for not having what he has." Sierra expressed her concerns to her husband, John, without pressing the issue too hard. She was worried about their son's attitude. But she didn't want to argue with John, who was often away due to his military service. As time passed, Anthony's problematic behavior didn't improve. And it evolved into something more concerning: bullying. Anthony, not fully aware of it yet, was becoming a primary instigator of bullying in his 6th grade class. Initially, there were isolated comments that went largely unnoticed. However, as months passed, especially with the increased use of social media, these comments escalated into outright humiliation, primarily targeting classmates less privileged than Anthony. He particularly targeted those who couldn't afford the same luxuries and called them derogatory names like rednecks, cheap, or low quality. Anthony's parents remained unaware of this behavior initially, although they were aware of his tendency to show off and feel superior to others due to his expensive clothing. Sierra received a letter from the school management, and when she read it, she couldn't hold back her tears. The letter detailed Anthony's disturbing actions in recent weeks. She knew she had to address the situation, whether her husband agreed or not. "Anthony, come out of your room right now and come here. I need to talk to you," Sierra shouted from the living room, ensuring he could hear her clearly from his second-floor room. Anthony came downstairs with little enthusiasm, avoiding eye contact with his mother. Sierra asked him to sit on the couch to talk, and he complied, though he still didn't look directly at her. Sierra began to read the letter aloud, explaining the gravity of Anthony's recent actions at school. Throughout the reading, Anthony remained silent, his demeanor showing remorse. Once Sierra finished reading the letter, Anthony attempted to explain himself, but his mother wouldn't allow it. She interrupted, saying, "It seems to me that it has been precisely your way of talking that has brought us into this situation. So, now, until I say so, you're going to be silent and listen to me carefully. Do you understand?" Her eyes reflected a mix of anger and pain over her son's actions. Anthony nodded in shame and listened to everything his mother had to say. It was the first time Sierra had spoken to him this way, and it was possibly the first proper scolding Anthony had ever received from his parents. He realized the severity of his actions and understood that he needed to learn from his mistakes. Anthony wasn't accustomed to his mother taking such a stern approach, so he simply listened and nodded as she spoke. Sierra made it clear that she was deeply ashamed of his actions, and emphasized that their family's financial status did not make him superior to others. She reminded him that material possessions didn't define a person's worth. "I want you to know that I'm very ashamed of what you've done, son. Your father and I did not raise you and your sister to behave this way. Just because you have money doesn't give you the right to mistreat others. Do you understand? It doesn't matter if a kid wears clothes from a place like Goodwill, it doesn't define them as a person or as a student," Sierra explained firmly, her disappointment evident in her eyes. Anthony, feeling remorseful, managed to utter, "I understand. Mom. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for all this to happen. It was just a joke. But it got out of hand," Sierra responded. "I know you're sorry. But sorry is not enough. Anthony, you have to learn to respect others and recognize when something is wrong. There will always be consequences. Now, go to your room. You're grounded. And you're not going out." Sierra ended their conversation, needing time to reflect on her son's actions and consider an appropriate punishment that would help him understand the gravity of his behavior. After their conversation, Sierra's primary goal was to prevent her son from becoming a bully, which was already starting to happen. She received a letter from the high school principal, confirming that Anthony had been teasing and humiliating classmates who shopped at places like Walmart and Goodwill. Sierra remained determined to educate her son about empathy and understanding to reverse the situation. In the principal's letter, it was explained how Anthony and his friends had mocked kids wearing inexpensive Goodwill clothes, recorded the incident, and shared it on social networks. Sierra believed that the most effective way to teach her son a lesson would be to have him experience the same situation. She decided that Anthony would shop for clothes at Goodwill while being recorded, and the video would be shared on his social networks for everyone to see. Her intent was to help him understand the importance of empathy, humility, and appreciating the privileges life had given him. A week after receiving the letter from the principal, and following a week of isolation and homework, Sierra imposed the punishment. She took Anthony shopping at Goodwill, requiring him to spend $20 of his own money to buy clothes to wear for an entire week. Anthony, clearly unhappy with his mother's choice of punishment, had to learn a valuable lesson about empathy and humility. The consequences of Anthony's punishment became evident as he reluctantly picked out clothes at Goodwill. Although he was dissatisfied, he refrained from complaining because Sierra believed that he would eventually come to appreciate the lesson. Sierra documented the entire punishment, taking photos and even recording a video of Anthony paying for the clothes and packing them into a Goodwill bag. That same evening, she made the decision to share her son's experience on Facebook, accompanied by an explanation of her intentions. In recent times, my 13-year-old son has been displaying entitled behavior, acting as if he's too good to shop at Walmart or making disparaging comments about school kids who shop at Goodwill. Among other things, I cannot condone such behavior. Today, he took his own $20 to Goodwill to purchase clothes for a week at school. Whatever he found would become his wardrobe. He's not thrilled, and he shed a few tears. But I firmly believe that 15 years from now, he'll look back and appreciate the day his mother compelled him to shop at Goodwill. My aim is to teach my children that money doesn't define one's worth. And if you ever belittle others based on where they shop, you've missed the true essence. I love Goodwill, Sierra wrote. Thankfully, Anthony learned valuable lessons through his punishment. The video and Sierra's heartfelt words quickly went viral, receiving support from hundreds of thousands of individuals who stood against bullying. They were even invited to share their experience on a national news channel, Fox 5 News. During the interview, Anthony expressed, "Let's not be spoiled, let's be grateful for what we have. This punishment has taught me to appreciate the true value of things. It's crucial to remain humble and care for others, regardless of their social standing or appearance." Sierra added, "I am proud of my son. Despite his mistakes and the pain he caused to innocent people, he took a step back, repented, and now understands the difference between right and wrong. Bullying begins and ends with the education we instill in our children at home." Following the interview, no one dared to mock children for shopping at affordable stores again. Anthony personally apologized to the children he had humiliated, and actively participated in anti-bullying activities and campaigns. Sierra's exemplary punishment had a profound impact, transforming her son from someone who believed he was superior to others into a compassionate individual who recognized the importance of empathy and kindness towards all, regardless of their clothing or social status.